There was a time, not long ago, when money was merely a tool, a servant of human need, a means to build, to trade, to sustain. But somewhere along the line, it ascended the throne. It ceased to serve and began to rule. We took this invention of human hands and made it divine. We bowed before it. We offered our labor, our integrity, even our compassion at its altar. And like all false gods, it demanded blood. The sacred lie of money is not written on the dollar bill. It is written in the hearts of those who believe that it can buy peace or meaning or love. It whispers that everything and everyone has a price, and when you begin to believe that, when you begin to measure your worth by what you own rather than who you are, something inside you dies. We live now in a culture that speaks the language of profit as if it were the language of truth. We call it growth. We call it success. We worship those who hoard while shaming those who have been crushed beneath the weight of the system. We have mistaken wealth for wisdom, greed for courage, exploitation for genius. And in doing so, we have rewritten the moral order of the universe. The prophets are gone, replaced by hedge fund managers. The teachers are gone, replaced by influencers selling false salvation through luxury and vanity. We have created a civilization where the worth of a human being is no longer measured by the depth of their compassion, but by the reach of their portfolio. Look around you. Everything sacred has been sold. Education, health, even water, the lifeblood of the earth, are commodities now. We no longer ask, is it right? We ask, is it profitable? We have been conditioned to believe that money itself carries virtue, that those who possess it are somehow blessed, chosen, destined. This is the mythology of empire, and every empire that has worshipped gold above God, power above mercy, has fallen into ruin. Rome, Babylon, Wall Street, they all follow the same script. The golden calf has many names, but its hunger is eternal. And what happens to a people when they begin to worship their own creation? They lose sight of their soul. They become what they adore. The dollar becomes not a symbol of exchange, but of identity. We no longer ask what something means, we ask what it costs. We no longer ask what is true, we ask what it earns. The marketplace replaces the cathedral. The stock ticker becomes our scripture, and in the quiet corners of our lives, we feel the emptiness of it, that gnawing sense that no matter how much we consume, no matter how high the numbers climb, something essential is missing. You see, the danger of money is not in its possession, but in its power to define reality. It seduces us into believing that control equals safety, that accumulation equals immortality. But it lies. It has always lied. It gives with one hand and takes with the other. It promises freedom while tightening the chains. And when a society builds its moral code around that lie, it births despair, the despair of those who can't keep up, the despair of those who realize that the game was never fair, that the ladder was built on the backs of the broken. Walk through any city in America and you will see the gospel of money written in steel and glass. The towers stretch to heaven, monuments to ambition, while below them the poor are driven into shadows, unseen, unwanted. We celebrate the billionaire as hero, the profiteer as savior, and mock the worker who demands dignity. This is not just economic violence, it is spiritual violence. It deforms our understanding of what it means to be human. The sacred lie of money tells us that we can buy transcendence, that we can replace grace with credit, purpose with profit. But the soul does not bargain. It demands truth. It demands justice. It demands that we remember that life cannot be owned, only shared. Every empire that forgets this truth meets its reckoning. And we are nearing ours. There is a reckoning coming for a nation that traded its conscience for convenience, that mistook luxury for joy and confusion for progress. The numbers will rise, the markets will swell, and yet the despair will deepen, because no amount of wealth can fill the vacuum of a heart that has forgotten how to love. Money was meant to serve us, but we have become its servants. We kneel to it, we kill for it, we destroy our planet to appease it, and still it is never enough. The sacred lie of money has chained our imagination. It has blinded us to the possibility of another way. A way where human worth is not bought, where success is measured in mercy, and where we see again what we have lost. Because until we unmask this lie, until we strip it of its holiness, we will remain slaves, slaves not to a system, but to our own creation. And the chains, my friends, are made not of iron, but of illusion. And from that illusion was born the corruption of the American dream, that fragile promise once whispered to the weary and the poor that here, in this land, dignity could be earned through honest work, that justice would be blind, and that no man would bow to another. But that dream has been auctioned off, piece by piece, to the highest bidder. The dream that once lit the hearts of immigrants, the farmers, the factory workers, the poets, now flickers faintly behind the neon glare of consumer paradise. We are told we are free, yet we are shackled to credit cards, to mortgages, to endless anxiety. We are told we are prosperous, yet millions live one paycheck away from ruin. We are told we are blessed, yet the soul of the nation trembles, hollowed out by greed. You see, the dream was never meant to be about wealth, it was about worth. It was not about owning more, but becoming more. It was not about the right to consume, but the right to live with dignity. But somewhere along the way we confused liberty with luxury. We mistook the pursuit of happiness for the pursuit of things. We taught our children to chase brands instead of truth, fame instead of wisdom, comfort instead of courage. And so the American dream, once a moral vision, has become a marketplace fantasy. The flag still waves, but beneath it lies a people haunted by debt, alienation, and despair. Those who built this illusion, the financiers, the advertisers, the architects of desire, understood something terrible about human weakness, that if you could teach people to measure themselves by material success, you could control them completely. You could make them believe they are failures if they are not rich, invisible if they are not admired, worthless if they are not envied. And so the dream became a weapon. It is no longer the dream of a carpenter or a teacher, but of a speculator, a celebrity, a CEO who feeds off the labor of others. It is the dream of domination, not community. It is the dream of empire, not humanity. Go stand in the forgotten towns of America, where factories once roared and now lie silent, where the working class was promised security and given nothing but layoffs and opioids. There you will find the ruins of that dream. You will meet the men and women who believed in it, who gave their lives to it, who now watch as their children inherit despair. The bankers were bailed out, the corporations were saved, but the people were abandoned. This is not failure by accident, it is betrayal by design. The dream was corrupted because the powerful needed it to be. They needed a myth to keep the masses asleep, to make exploitation look like opportunity. And the cruelest part is this: they sold us the illusion that anyone could rise, that all it took was effort and faith, while ensuring that the ladder was pulled up just out of reach. We glorify the few who make it to the top as if their success justifies the suffering of millions below. We call it merit, we call it capitalism, but what it truly is idolatry. It is the worship of winners, the dehumanization of losers. It is a system that sanctifies greed and condemns compassion as weakness. We have become a people obsessed with appearance, terrified of poverty, ashamed of struggle. We have forgotten that greatness has nothing to do with wealth and everything to do with character. The poor, once seen as brothers and sisters, are now cast as burdens, blamed for their own suffering. We mock them from our screens, we pass them in our streets, and we call their pain inevitable. This moral decay seeps through our politics, our schools, our faith. Even the church, once the sanctuary of the oppressed, now often preaches a gospel of prosperity, as though Christ died to secure us better investments. Listen closely, and you can hear the emptiness in our national voice. It is the sound of a people who have traded purpose for pleasure, solidarity for status, meaning for comfort. We are rich in possessions, but bankrupt in spirit. Our heroes are no longer those who serve, but those who sell. The old virtues, humility, courage, sacrifice, have been replaced by spectacle, vanity, and self-promotion. We have become actors in a play written by those who profit from our distraction. And yet, beneath the glittering facade, there is a quiet rebellion stirring. In the forgotten hearts of those who still remember what it means to care, to share, to sacrifice, to live not for gain but for goodness, there remains a spark, a dangerous, beautiful spark, because the corruption of the American dream is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of awakening. Every illusion, once shattered, gives birth to truth. And when a nation finally sees that its dream was stolen, it may yet reclaim something far greater, not the dream of wealth, but the dream of being fully, fiercely human again. And it is in that human longing, in that aching hunger to feel alive again, that the machinery of debt tightens its grip. Because every dream that has been stolen must be replaced with a substitute, and debt is the currency of false hope. They tell us we are free, free to buy, free to borrow, free to drown quietly in promises we can never fulfill. But this is not freedom. This is servitude in its modern disguise. The old chains were made of iron. The new ones are invisible, made of digits and contracts, interest rates and credit scores. They do not shackle the body. They bind the mind, the spirit, the will. Debt is the silent overseer of the new plantation. It whispers through every mailbox, every notification, every sleepless night. It tells the worker he must endure humiliation because he owes too much to risk rebellion. It tells the student her education is her liberation while enslaving her before she even begins to live. It tells the mother that if she works a few more hours, takes one more loan, cuts one more corner, her children might have what she never did, and so she labors until her body breaks, and still it is never enough. Debt feeds on desperation. It fattens on shame. It is the invisible empire of the modern age. This empire does not need soldiers, it needs believers. It needs you to believe that what you owe is your fault, that your struggle is a sign of failure, that your suffering is deserved. And once you believe that, you will not rise. You will not fight. You will work harder, longer, cheaper, not out of hope, but out of fear. That is the genius of the system. It convinces its captives that the cage is their own making. Walk through the neighborhoods of the working poor, see the payday lenders, the title loan shops, the credit traps disguised as opportunity, each one a small temple to the god of debt, built to extract what little remains of human dignity. And above them all, the great citadels of finance, banks so vast they can collapse entire nations and be rewarded for it. They call it stability. They call it the market. But it is extortion dressed as economics, theft baptized as policy. The few profit from the suffering of the many, and they dare call it freedom. Every empire must have its mythology, and the mythology of debt is responsibility. Pay what you owe. Play by the rules. But what rules are these? Who wrote them? The same institutions that gamble with the pensions of the elderly, that prey upon the vulnerable, that privatize need and monetize despair. When they lose, we pay. When we lose, we are abandoned. This is not morality. It is the inversion of morality. It is the sanctification of greed. Debt is not only an economic condition, it is a spiritual weapon. It teaches people to internalize their oppression. It replaces solidarity with self-loathing. It keeps the masses divided, ashamed, too consumed by survival to dream of justice. And that is precisely how the powerful want it. For as long as you are paying interest, you will never demand a revolution. You will keep your head down, your voice quiet, your heart chained to the illusion that someday, somehow it will all be worth it. But it will not. It never has been. The machine was never built to free you. It was built to feed upon you. Every payment you make, every hour you work to sustain the system, strengthens the walls of your own captivity. The bankers understand this better than you do. They know that when a people become indebted, they become obedient. And an obedient nation cannot love, cannot create, cannot truly live. There is a kind of violence that leaves no bruises. It is the violence of a paycheck that never stretches far enough, of a life measured by bills instead of dreams. It is the violence of a system that convinces you to thank it for your chains. We see suicide rates rise, families collapse, hope erode, and still we call it progress. Still we call it civilization. But a civilization that feeds on despair is already dead. There will come a time, perhaps soon, when this machinery will falter. When the illusion of infinite credit collides with the limits of a finite world, when the workers will look at their debts and realize the debt was never theirs to begin with, when the veil will tear and what stands revealed will not be an economy, but an empire of ghosts built on lies, sustained by suffering, worshipped by the blind. And in that moment of revelation, when the spell of debt is broken, the people will remember something dangerous, that life is not alone. That dignity cannot be borrowed, that the only true wealth is found not in accumulation but in connection, in love, in courage, in defiance. And when they remember that, when they rise, not as debtors but as human beings, the empire will tremble, because its power was never in the money. It was in the belief that we owed it something. We do not. We never did, And when that realization begins to spread, when the people awaken to the truth that they were never born to serve markets or bow before capital, the betrayal of democracy stands exposed in the full light of day. Because democracy at its heart was meant to be the collective voice of the people, the cry of the many against the greed of the few. It was meant to protect the weak, restrain the powerful, and ensure that justice was not for sale. But that vision has been defiled. What we call democracy now is theater, a ritual of consent in which we pretend to choose while the real decisions are made in boardrooms and banks. The ballot box has become a stage prop, the politicians its actors, and the financiers its directors. The will of the people has been auctioned off to the highest bidder, and the price was our freedom. Money has seeped into every crevice of political life, corroding it from within. Elections are no longer contests of ideas but bidding wars of influence. The candidates are brands, their promises are marketing slogans written by donors. The law, which once stood as a shield for the common citizen, has become a weapon in the hands of those who can afford to bend it. They call it lobbying, a polite word for legalized bribery. They call it campaign finance, a euphemism for the purchase of power. Every reform that threatens the rich is dismantled, every policy that protects the poor is diluted. And we are told this is democracy. It is not. It is oligarchy with better lighting. Think of what it means to live under such a lie, to be told that your vote matters, while your livelihood is decided by corporations you will never meet, your wages by algorithms you cannot see, your future by markets that care nothing for human life. This is the great betrayal. The founders of this republic warned that when money and politics become one, liberty dies. And yet, here we are, watching that death unfold in slow motion. Our leaders kneel before Wall Street, not because they are ignorant, but because they are owned. The banks write the laws, the people pay the price, and still we cling to the illusion. We wave our flags, we sing our anthems, we whisper to ourselves that we are free. But freedom without power is an illusion, and power without accountability is tyranny. The architects of this new order understand that if they control the economy, they control the state. The democracy we were taught to cherish has been hollowed out, its language preserved but its soul devoured. What remains is a shadow government of money, invisible, untouchable, unaccountable. Walk through Washington, and you will see the temples of this new faith, marble monuments paid for by corporations where lobbyists move like priests through corridors of privilege. Their sermons are written in profit margins, their prayers recited in stock reports. The citizens, once sovereign, have been reduced to spectators. The republic, once sacred, has become a marketplace. And in that marketplace, justice is a commodity. There is a cruelty in this that cuts deeper than injustice. It is the cruelty of betrayal. Because the people still believe in democracy, they still vote, they still hope, they still send their children to fight in wars waged for profit, believing it is for freedom. They still work themselves to exhaustion, believing that hard work will be rewarded. They still cling to the symbols, the flag, the anthem, the Constitution, unaware that the substance beneath those symbols has been stolen. What they love no longer exists, and those who took it smile from their towers and tell them to be grateful. The betrayal of democracy is not only political, it is spiritual. It robs people of faith in one another. It teaches them to mistrust, to isolate, to retreat into tribes of fear. It divides the nation into camps, pitting the exploited against the equally exploited, while the true masters sit above the chaos, feeding it, profiting from it. This is how democracies die, not with an explosion, but with the slow suffocation of truth. And yet somewhere deep in the American soul, a restlessness stirs. The people feel the weight of the deceit. They may not yet have the language for it, but they sense that something sacred has been violated. They sense that the system no longer serves them, that the contract between the governed and the governing has been broken. And when that awareness becomes unbearable, when the hunger for dignity overcomes the fear of disobedience, the masks will fall. For democracy, even in its death, carries within it the seed of resurrection. It can be reborn, but not through politicians, not through the machinery that destroyed it. It can only be reborn through conscience, through ordinary men and women who refuse to be bought, who see through the lies, who understand that freedom is not a gift from the powerful, but a demand from the powerless. That is the task before us. to remember that democracy is not a system, it is a covenant, and that covenant must be rewritten in the language of truth, courage, and sacrifice before the last light of liberty is extinguished forever. And as that covenant fades from our collective memory, as the sacred bond that once tied justice to conscience unravels, what emerges is something darker, more insidious, the spiritual decay of a nation. You can see it in our eyes, you can feel it in the silence that falls between us, in the way we walk past one another without seeing, without hearing. We have become a people numb to the suffering that surrounds us, insulated by distraction, sedated by comfort. The television flickers with stories of ruin and death, and we change the channel. The hungry line up at food banks, and we scroll past them. The homeless sleep beneath the glittering towers of our prosperity, and we tell ourselves they chose this life. We no longer feel. We no longer blush. The moral nerve has died. This is the cost of worshiping the god of money, not merely poverty or inequality, but the disfigurement of the human soul. When everything is commodified, nothing is sacred. When value is reduced to price, meaning evaporates. We laugh at virtue, mock humility, reward arrogance, and call it success. We feed our children into the digital machinery of consumption, teaching them that their worth depends on likes, followers, the illusion of significance. The heart, that ancient compass of right and wrong, has been silenced beneath the noise of endless appetite. We mistake our distractions for freedom, our addictions for joy. The malls and the screens have replaced our cathedrals, and the new liturgy is consumption. Buy, upgrade, replace. This is how we pray now. And yet, for all our abundance, we are haunted by emptiness. The suicide rates climb, the addictions spread, and the loneliness deepens. We are surrounded by wealth and starved of meaning. Our children inherit this void, this cold inheritance of despair, and we wonder why they cannot see a future worth living for. The spiritual rot has seeped into every institution, into our schools, our churches, our art, our politics. Even faith itself has been repackaged into spectacle. The gospel has been stripped of its fire, replaced by prosperity sermons that promise salvation through success. Christ has been remade in the image of the entrepreneur, humility replaced with ambition, sacrifice with self-promotion. The cross is draped in the flag, and the poor are told that their suffering is a lack of faith. The prophets who once thundered against kings now whisper blessings to power. We have betrayed not only democracy, but the sacred itself. And beneath it all lies fear, a deep, unspoken terror of confronting the truth of what we've become. Because to see it clearly would demand repentance. It would demand sacrifice. It would require that we tear down the idols we have built. Not the ones of gold or stone, but the ones within ourselves, our vanity, our greed, our apathy. And we do not want to. We would rather sink quietly into oblivion than confront the darkness that has hollowed us out. A society that cannot feel compassion cannot survive. When cruelty becomes normal, when deceit becomes strategy, when exploitation becomes the foundation of our lives, collapse is inevitable. We mistake our technological prowess for progress, our wealth for stability. But moral decay precedes every fall. Rome did not collapse because it lacked armies or riches. It collapsed because it lost its soul. And that is where we stand now, brilliant, connected, and utterly lost. Look into the eyes of the young, and you will see the reflection of this decay. They were promised a world of opportunity and handed a wasteland of anxiety. They were told to dream and then buried under debt. They were taught to compete, not to care. They were raised in the shadow of screens, where empathy is an inconvenience and outrage is entertainment. We have taught them to perform humanity, not to live it. And still we dare to call this progress. But there are moments, fleeting, fragile, when the mask slips. When a disaster strikes and strangers reach out to help one another. When someone risks everything to speak truth to power. When a child gives their food to another without being told. In those moments we glimpse what has been buried, but not destroyed, the capacity to love, to sacrifice, to see the divine spark in another human being. It is small, yes, but it is not gone. That, perhaps, is the only hope that remains, that somewhere beneath the ruins of our moral collapse, beneath the noise and vanity and greed, the human spirit still flickers. It waits for us to remember. It waits for us to reclaim the language of the soul, the language of mercy, courage, tenderness, and truth. Because when a nation forgets how to feel, it forgets how to live. And if we do not awaken soon, if we continue down this path of numbness and denial, we will discover too late that the greatest tragedy of all was not that we lost our wealth or our power or even our democracy, but that we lost our humanity and mistook that loss for progress. And yet, even in that loss, even in the shadow of all that we have destroyed, there remains a faint and trembling light, the possibility of redemption, because no civilization, no matter how corrupt, is beyond grace. But grace does not come cheap. It demands truth. It demands repentance. It demands that we confront without illusion or excuse what we have become. The path to redemption begins the moment we refuse to lie to ourselves any longer. When we stop calling greed ambition, when we stop mistaking cruelty for strength, when we stop worshiping those who exploit and start standing beside those who suffer, that is where rebirth begins. It will not come from the powerful. They are too deeply bound to their idols, too intoxicated by their wealth, too frightened by the idea of a world they cannot control. It will come from the broken, from those who have nothing left to lose but their chains. It will come from the mothers who cannot feed their children, from the workers who have been cast aside, from the young who see through the lies and dare to dream of something truer. Redemption is born not in palaces but in the ruins, in the quiet acts of defiance, the whispered words of love, the refusal to surrender what makes us human. We must reclaim the heart that money cannot touch, the sacred bond between one soul and another. Because no system can withstand a people who remember how to care. When compassion becomes an act of resistance, when mercy becomes rebellion, the empire trembles. The powerful understand this, which is why they work so hard to divide us, to make us fear one another, to keep us angry and distracted. They know that love, not romantic love, not sentimental love, but the fierce love of justice, is the one force they cannot buy, cannot corrupt, cannot defeat. To be redeemed as a nation, we must recover the courage to feel again, to let the suffering of others pierce our indifference. It will hurt. It must hurt. For pain is the beginning of healing. We must grieve what we have done to our planet, to our neighbors, to ourselves. We must confront the graves we have built with our apathy. And in that mourning, we must make a vow never again to trade compassion for comfort, never again to silence the truth for convenience, never again to sell the soul of our humanity for the illusion of success. Redemption is not a moment. It is a way of life. It is choosing again and again to walk toward the light even when the darkness mocks you. It is refusing to let despair have the final word. It is finding beauty in the broken, hope in the hopeless, and strength in solidarity. Every small act of kindness. Every time you speak when silence would be safer. Every time you give when the world tells you to hoard, is a strike against the machinery of death. That is how we begin to reclaim our collective soul. We must build communities that remember what it means to belong. We must break bread together again, not as consumers, but as brothers and sisters bound by the same fragile hope. We must rebuild our churches, our schools, our neighborhoods, not in the image of efficiency or profit, but in the image of love. A nation cannot be healed by policy alone. It is healed by presence, by people willing to stand in the ruins and refuse to leave until compassion becomes law again. We will be told it is impossible. We will be mocked, ridiculed, dismissed as narv. But the prophets of every age were mocked before they were heard. Truth always sounds foolish in a world built on lies. Yet history moves not by the consent of the powerful, but by the courage of the faithful. Those who, in the face of empire, dare to believe that the human spirit cannot be extinguished. So we must rise, not in anger, but in love, not with weapons, but with conviction, not to destroy, but to rebuild. Redemption is not about vengeance. It is about remembering that even those who built this system are prisoners of it, enslaved by the same illusion. To redeem a nation is to redeem its enemies, to call them back into the circle of humanity, to show them that freedom is not dominance, but the shared breath of truth. If we do this, if we dare to love in an age of hatred, to tell the truth in a time of lies, to serve instead of consume, then perhaps this empire, like every empire before it, will fall. But unlike the others, something holy will rise from its ashes. A people who have learned that the true power of money was never in what it could buy, but in what it could corrupt, and that the only wealth worth having is the wealth of the heart. That, and that alone, can save the soul of America.